The Master System is home to a fair share of games that tell the tales of ancient Japanese warriors, ninjas, and samurais alike. Whether they're a full-on adventure on their own or a spoof on the topic, there's lots to choose from if you want to enjoy some sword-swinging, shuriken-throwing action. Among them is a title that's always intrigued me. It seemed to take the platforming of classics like Shinobi and fuse it with the moveset building of Double Dragon games to create something new for the time. Kenseiden is a side-scrolling action game for the system that takes place against the backdrop of ancient Japan, where a band of malevolent warlocks have taken over the country. They've also stolen a legendary sword and 5 ancient scrolls from the family of Hayato, a samurai warrior who you play as on his vengeance mission to defeat the warlocks and reclaim the lost items to ensure peace for Japan. On this journey, you'll get to experience 16 different provinces on your way to the Black Temple to face off with the Master Warlock. I'd love to tell you more here to set the stage, but unfortunately there's not very much fanfare around the plot. There are no opening cutscenes to take in, and the back of the box and the instruction manual only have a few sentences between them. I can think of at least one other Master System game where some stolen scrolls are the driving force for adventure, and that one did a much nicer job of highlighting some of its lore. Maybe we'll take a look at that one some other time. After pressing start on the title screen, you're immediately thrown into the action of the first stage. You don't have much time to get a feel for the character before the droves of monsters start turning out to fight, and as you walk along, they more or less appear out of thin air, moving double or triple your character's own speed. When I first started into Kenseiden, I lost half my health bar within the first few minutes of play, and I'll admit that my initial few attempts facing death after glorious death did not instill any confidence in my ability to play this game well. With relatively stiff character movement and a seemingly never-ending stream of foes to cut through, I wasn't sure I'd ever get far into this one, never mind actually finish it. Pretty quickly, I learned that this adventure is very much like Lord of the Sword and Spellcaster in a couple of ways. It went beyond the visual parallels, even though Kenseiden has overall grungier overtones compared to the others. The most glaring likeness was how combat needed to be approached. You just can't run around as fast as possible while swinging away and expect to survive, because you just don't have a big enough arsenal of attacks to tackle everything that the game throws at you. There's no way to effectively deal with more than 1 or 2 enemies at a time, and since monsters only appear as you move through the stage, everything has to be methodical. Spawn some enemies, do away with them, and then move a little further. There are many games that play this way, but Kenseiden really seems to lean on slower progress and platforming with a little bit of exploration built into the level design. That's right, levels aren't just laid out as linear left-to-right segments, but actually have a few branching paths that either lead you forward or to extras like power-ups if you take the time to search them out. This took me completely by surprise because I wasn't expecting this degree of depth here. The back of the box's generic screenshots didn't really convey anything special beyond a straight action platformer, but the added layers of complexity were welcome and kicked the whole experience up a level or 2 for me. Each stage was not only expansive, but you were typically rewarded for time spent ducking down an out-of-the-way staircase or poking your head into a doorway or 2. With a little repetition, you can very quickly optimize a route through a stage to snatch up all of your favorite extras, but I really enjoyed the anticipation of finding something useful around a new corner my first time through the game. Kenseiden is truly a journey that gets better the more time you spend with it. The character control took a bit of getting used to, since some aspects of the movement feel sluggish. You get tons of verticality while jumping, but horizontal motion feels inhibited. Hayato takes about 1 billion steps per normal person's stride when he's running, and that lack of momentum is also felt while jumping. It never seems like you're going to make it to the other side of even the smallest gaps. That is, when you can tell what parts of the scene are solid ground and which ones are there for decoration. Once you know, but I had a few unexpected moments of walking off a platform to my doom thinking there was ground there. Even worse yet are the surprise enemy spawns that lurk just outside of your screen's scrolling edge. Monsters often materialized in the exact spot I was hoping to land, and unfortunately the knockback is severe. Getting touched by any of the Demon Army members will have you stumbling all over the place, so all that you can do is hope to shake out of it in time. If you value your life, don't you dare ever get hit on an incline. In these instances, you completely lose control of Hayato and he staggers backwards for a ridiculously long time, usually meeting a horrible end in a nearby pit waiting with open arms. These deaths felt really cheap and unfair because even when you knew that an enemy would spawn and tried to anticipate it, missing your attack would routinely rob you of one of the very few lives you get to complete the game. That's if you could even destroy the offending enemy. Sometimes you'd get hit by indestructible boulders that were very difficult to avoid. While the controls obviously afford their own set of challenges, the real difficulty of Kinsading comes from the lack of staying power. Even when you're being as careful as possible, that short health bar only lasts so long before you're cuddling with the ground again. The good news is that the game provides many opportunities to increase Hayato's total hit points by completing training areas, and these can be found at appropriate intervals throughout the game. The bad news is that they're an absolute nightmare to complete. They force a series of agonizingly difficult obstacle courses packed with arrows flying at you from every direction and height, spike floors, and other platforming hazards. If you get hit on even a single pixel of your body just once, you fail and have to go back to the beginning to try again. With a significant time sink, these could become manageable, but for me, the extra insurance of a longer health bar wasn't worth the time I would have had to invest to get it. I was able to beat Kinsading after finishing only one novice course at the beginning of the game, and never touched a single one after that, but I also spent a lot of time learning the stages and seeking out healing items to compensate. While it was thoughtful to include a mechanism to help players out, making the hill so steep to climb diminished the sentiment. The other glaring problem with the training areas was that any health bar increases you're awarded only last for one continue. When you run out of lives, your health bar gets chopped all the way back down to the default length, and all of that effort goes to waste. If this seems cruel, that's not even the only way that you're punished for dying. There are these sword icons that you can find in certain provinces that increase attack strength, but these bonuses disappear if you lose your current life. They don't even last for a whole continue. If you picked up a strength boost in a stage that you died in, it'll respawn there. But if you pick the item up in a different stage, you'll have to backtrack to find it again. You can repeat any area that you've already completed, but it's not very convenient to do so because of how the map works. There's no magical teleportation ability to move wherever you like, whenever you like, and you can only access nearby stages that articulate with the one you're in. They inserted a shortcut in completed areas to make backtracking faster, but there are always avenues to find new ones in later levels. Losing your upgrades in Kinsading isn't nearly as awful as getting knocked down to base weapon and speed deep into a shooter, for example, but it would have been preferable to not have to work so hard to make up lost ground with every death. Thankfully, there are a subset of skills and stat upgrades that are permanent, and these come from taking out the members of the Warlock crew. Along with the occasional attack strength boost, you'll also learn special moves after recovering each of the 5 scrolls. When I read the manual for the first time and saw all of the different combos, I was concerned that I'd have difficulty getting some of these to work in the moment. I'm all thumbs in the worst way when it comes to these sorts of input precision mechanics, but it turned out that all the moves were actually pretty natural to use versus some nonsense you might find on a system with a more complex controller. And surprisingly, there wasn't a single useless ability among the bunch. They matched up nicely with many of the new enemies you'd face soon after acquiring them. Eventually, you get Hayato feeling so powerful with his sword that he just flails around while running and takes down anything in his way with this neat berserk attack. There's a genuinely cool feeling of mastery towards the end of the game. I think it's worth mentioning that Hayato's combat skills feel good even before you get any of the upgrades. The range of the sword is pretty long, and it's leaps and bounds ahead of the close-to-the-body wiener slice that Landau in Lord of the Sword puts out. Though you can't attack quickly at first, you definitely don't run into enemies nearly as much as you do in other games with shorter weapon reach. The beasts that you fight in Kinsading start out as all of the usual suspects like squat bugs, bats, and skeletons, but as the adventure unfurls, more and more eccentric monsters show up to the party. One such example are harlot lizards that are way less exciting than they sound, or the likes of child scarers that take a bunch of hits to kill. Hideous-faced snakes are also lurking, but it's a bit hard to make them out here. Visually, there's lots of uniqueness in the enemy sprites, but the majesty of their design seems inconsistent, like they were assigned to many different people. Some of them honestly look pretty gnarled, while others look awesome with tons of detail, but at least the manual made a significant effort in its bestiary pages to help stretch the imagination. What this game lacked in enemy sprite luster was more than made up for with the bosses. The majority of the fights are very easy with only a smidgen of practice, but a few of the specific Warlock weaknesses were not so easy to spot at first. The boss sprites are enormous, and some of them have a hitbox that's not always vulnerable to attack. It's not quite as simple as just aiming for their faces, and I really enjoyed the experimentation. The last couple of Warlocks, if you can even call a giant floating eyeball or a skull a Warlock I guess, felt like total pushovers since I was so powered up with many of the scroll moves. Despite Kinsading giving off an open world feel, if you arrive on a boss's doorstep without the appropriate scroll moves to fight him, you'll probably die trying. Having an intended path hidden under the guise of openness was a perfect way to ensure that players explored thoroughly and were not missing any of the major skills or permanent stat boosts necessary for the final face-off. That fight was a big step up in difficulty, and I'm not sure that you're able to take down the Master Warlock without all of the moves in your arsenal. The only thing that really makes Kinsaiden fall short in my eyes is the continue system. You start out with 3 lives and the game ends when you lose them all. Sure, you can find extra lives or get new ones with high point scores, and you can even continue once if you find the diary item. Even still, it was extremely hard to make it through the entire quest on 6 lives. In the helpful hint section of the instructions, continue mode is described, and this does actually give you another few free continues in addition to the one that you can get if you find the diary. So my question is, why didn't they just build this right in? I exploited the hell out of this as many times as I was allowed, just to have a chance to get to the end, but eventually it stops working. I get that having limited continues will drive up the playtime and replay value by forcing players to commit to learning the game well, but if they were going to go through the trouble to include a feature like this, it would have made more sense just to stick it in the regular game rather than make it some secret special code that's hidden in plain sight. At first glance, Kinsaiden was gearing up to be a more elaborate than average side-scroller with a barely there plot, but I was pleasantly surprised by its depth. The controls are far from perfect, but the feelings of responsive combat and skill development as you spend more time with it created a richer experience than other games I played on the Master System. While I wouldn't say it's the cream of the crop on offer, I still think that anyone that enjoys difficult platforming with a little extra flair on the side should take it out for a spin.